Mr. O'Connor, thank you for participating in the EASMC endorsement process. This interview will be recorded and posted on our YouTube and our website. Please speak up clearly so that your answers can be heard when answering the questions. My name is Dwayne Hancock. I'm the EASMC Vice President.
My name is Tiffany Thompson. I'm a building service worker at George Washington Carver Elementary.
I'm Elaine Deans. I'm a special education paraeducator at Leonardtown Middle School.
I'm Mary Ann Tomasic. I'm a career advisor at the Chesapeake Public Charter School, Forest Technology Center, and our virtual cabinet.
Katrina Mills, building service manager at Spring Ridge Middle School.
Mr. O'Connor, the term educator refers to all St. Mary's County Public School employees. The first question: if elected, what are your top 3 priorities?
So one of my biggest first priority is to get the spending within county government under control. So the last 4 years, what I've watched is spend, more spend, more spend. The taxes have gone up and down and fluctuated, especially the income tax, like a basketball. There's been no consistency for the residents of this county, and that has a trickle-down effect to every single agency that's funded. And then again this year, I watched the last budget work session, and the commissioners are talking about yet another tax increase, but they lowered the income tax last year. There's no consistency. So getting the budget fine-tuned the right way so there's consistency, and making sure that our spending is online is a key one. Our infrastructure and public safety are the other two, right? The infrastructure in the county, and what I mean by infrastructure is not more new infrastructure, it's actually taking care of what we already have, and also downsizing some of the projects that are there so we can afford things. So for instance, one of the biggest topics is $18 million to renovate a school in the north end of the county, right? And Chopticon, we know that there needs to be a whole overhaul that was done. When I was on the board before, we took care of the roofing system and the HVAC, and we know how much those cost. But taking care of our buildings to where they need to be so we can get more life out of them, which quite frankly I think that the school system and our Department of Public Works does a great job at. There can be more that can be done when it's prioritized right. And as far as public safety is concerned, that includes not only school safety, that includes fire, EMS, and our law enforcement. Our fire, of course, being volunteer, and EMS being a hybrid system.
Thank you.
In your view, what challenges do you see the children in our county facing as they work to be successful in our schools?
I think the toughest thing, and that's so broad because there's, first grade through 12th. I mean, if you break it down, our high school students, right? I think the toughest thing that they're facing now is a politically charged climate. They're facing that curriculum that's being brought down from the state, where if they're focusing on learning and what their future is going to be and how we're preparing them for that. And I think that bridge is gapped by the educators that are in the classroom and supporting that. But I do know that's a huge stress for the students. And fortunately, I get to see that and hear that from them as a coach. So I do understand that aspect of it. And time. Just time to get everything done that they want to get done in order to graduate. Middle school and elementary school, I don't know that they have too many worries, at that age. God bless them. That's probably a great age. I think the challenges at that level are our class for them is, getting the right amount of attention in the classroom because of classroom size, right? How are our teachers having to teach? Is it to one standard because we're not able to accelerate the classroom because we need to make sure that everybody's staying on the same page? Is it getting all the information out at the same time? And then, of course, are those kids getting nourishment? Are they getting the food that they need at home? Are their parents able to help them with the homework? Those are natural challenges that they're going to face. And then, of course, there's extracurricular with sports. There's enough learning and sports and balance with that.
Thank you.
Which considerations are most important when drafting and finalizing the county budget?
it's not equity. I don't believe equity is a huge concern in the county budget. Or equality, both very different words for a different reason, because each agency has a different function. I think it is a huge consideration, and it's very important to me that we look at the money that's there and where it's going to best serve everyone in the county, right? And that is, to me, the most important thing. That there's not pet projects within the budget, that the services that are there, we're actually getting a solid return on our investment for what we're putting into it. I think the county does a good job at that. But one thing I don't believe in is that just because we do it for one department means we have to do it for another. I just don't, I can't support that. You know, there's different mechanisms for different things, and I think that's a huge consideration when we're building a budget. Estimating the growth rate appropriately is so huge in the budget. And it took me a full term to come around to it, working with Scott Smith and Tammy McCourt. And I finally sat down with them, and they showed me a spreadsheet. And I still have the spreadsheet to this day. But it was the actual growth rates and the projections that they did to use when they were negotiating and/or building their budget. And I went back and aligned it, and they were usually dead on. So for me, estimating the growth rate is important, but it's also keeping an open mind during the budget process that you don't know everything, and that somebody is going to know a different process about it. And if you're not willing to accept that reality, then you're having a shortfall in yourself right away, and you're never going to get to a budget that you actually need. It's just point blank. And that, I think, was the biggest learning moment for me in my second term. And it changed my outlook on everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As a county commissioner, how will you include the voice of the St. Mary's County Public Schools and public school educators in your decision-making?
Skip at number 4.
It is number 4.
Oh. I thought number 4 was the positive relationship. That's how I'll foster it. Okay, all right. So that's fine. All right. Now, I was looking forward to answering that one. All right.
Did you want me to read that again?
No, it's right here.
Okay.
I got you. All right. That's what threw me off. All right. Well, you know, it's about having a listening ear, right? You have to keep your mouth quiet sometimes and listen to what's actually going on. Fostering a positive relationship and including the voice of the St. Mary's County Public Schools and the educators in my decision making comes from working with the Board of Education, working with the superintendent. You know, one of the things that always drove me nuts was the negativity that could come out of the budget work session. I mean, it really, really just drove me nuts. I liked working with the superintendent and also members of the union, and I could tell you that there were times where it was always tense. The road to get to where we need to wasn't always the easiest road. It was bumpy, there was forks, there was a lot of back and forth, and sometimes unnecessary rhetoric on both sides, and some necessary rhetoric. It's just how it is. But I think we got there. But it can be more positive. How it can be done is having more in-depth conversations. You know, the budget work session isn't just where it has to happen. Those conversations, as I learned in my second term, can happen anytime, any place, with anyone, and they frequently did, which I found helped in my decision making. So by fostering that positive environment, I think it also sets a better example for, you know, our citizens, for our kids that are watching. You know, they don't see the negativity, they don't see the questioning of those that are in positions of authority. And you shouldn't question it, but it's how you handle it, right? No demeaning remarks and no talking down to people. You know, it just can't happen. It's not productive for anybody. So I think that's how you foster a positive environment. Sometimes you just keep quiet and listen.
Thank you.
Please share an overview of your campaign, including your key endorsements, fundraising, and campaign plans, and why you believe you'll be a competitive candidate.
So my campaign, all right, so I was not going to run for office again. I had my fill, I was enjoying private life, and I was enjoying reffing ice hockey and coaching hockey, and my son, he's 8, about to be 9. I was really enjoying that. And going up to Waldorf to, take him there, started taking longer and longer. There was more traffic lights, there was more gas stations, there was more growth. It was just nonstop. And then came along the proposed, crisis intervention center up in the north end. And while we need crisis intervention centers, it was how they went about it that was sprung on to the citizens of the county. There was no pre-discussions, there was no planning, no input, and the commissioners had known about it for an extensive period of time. And of course the taxes, I started watching the taxes increase, and one of the most frustrating parts of it was the taxes were increased for education, but then the money never made it to education, and then they decreased it and shorted the budget the next year. So all of that put together made me, talk to my wife, and I said, I think I want to run again. And she said, "Are you sure?" I thought about it for a while, and then I did. And that the overview of my campaign and how I got there is, this isn't, St. Mary's County is a rural county, and changing it without having input from the citizens in the way it is it's just not how it's supposed to happen. It really isn't. So my campaign really is about making sure that the citizens have a voice, they're heard, the input is there, and that the needs are met adequately for our county. And adequate is a broad word, it's a political word. I recognize that. What is adequate? But really the residents have to voice that. And then endorsements, well, nobody's really started the endorsement process yet, so this would probably be a first. My son endorses me. He thinks it'd be a great job. And fundraising. So I am going to do some fundraising, but I don't want to, one, spend a lot of money on the campaign, and two, I don't want to have to do any large donations. When you get large donations, they come with large asks and large favors, right? So I prefer that if somebody's going to donate, they donate because they want to see the vision of what I'm putting out there, and that's the direction that they want to go. And competitive, I do believe I'm a competitive candidate. There's no doubt about that. I think that of the field for the District 3 County Commissioner, somebody that's had the experience for eight years, has already had the trials, the errors, the learning moments, the good times, the bad times, and knows the budget, knows the county. It's easy to get back to where we need to be, and that gives a competitive nature in itself, but also my ability just to understand where people are coming from. That's, again, walking off the lacrosse field today to hear, and I do appreciate the leniency with not wearing a shirt and tie. I really don't like wearing suits anyway, but I do appreciate that. So I think that's what it's about. And anybody can say they're competitive, know they're competitive, but I guess it really comes down to that finish line.
Thank you. Next question. County Commissioners passed a tax increase effective 2025 to support the blueprint. As a county commissioner, will you commit to use the revenue as it was intended for to support public education?
Yeah, interesting enough, and then they rolled it back. They rolled that income tax increase back. So, one, I don't want to do tax increases just off the break. I don't want to do that. That's not where I want to be. I want to try and reduce the burden. However, the money that was done with that particular tax increase, because it was earmarked for the blueprint, should be allocated towards the blueprint, right? And we all know that when you allocate that money, it increases maintenance of effort, and it increases it year over year. So if you're gonna say something on the record on the dais, and you're gonna go ahead and use it for that, it should have been applied to that. And I think I already stated it, I didn't even realize that question was there. That was just abhorrent to me, how that happened. You know, the citizens of the county did not push back on that tax increase, at least hugely, right? And they saw it was for education, and then it never went there. And then it got rolled back and the budget got shorted. I just couldn't believe it, so, yeah. So the answer is yes, the money that was raised from that should have went to where it was supposed to go, and I would have supported it going to where it was supposed to go if I was a part of that board.
Thank you.
What specific revenue strategies would you implement to fully fund public education?
So that's where the interesting question, budget session after budget session comes up. What is fully funded, right? Is that what the Board of Education asked? Is that maintenance of effort? Is that, what is fully funded, right? Because we all have asks, and then there's wants, and then there's needs. So, and this is the what strategies, right? So I would take what I did with the superintendent in my final years, and I would sit down and I would work with him and say, all right, how are we really defined fully funded? What is it you need to make the schools operational, provide the services that are necessary, whether that's mental health services, right down to the classroom, down to those that are support services staff. You know, what is it we're really looking at here? And then what are your asks over that? And then work the budget that way. Because there's always asks over, right? There always is. Every department has it. And that's what I would do. And then that strategy works well because you can then look at the growth rate, you can look how much revenue you have, and then you can place it in early in the budget. Early. And just start working from there. It makes it so much easier dealing with the rest of the departments once you have the largest funding pot set to the side. But knowing that ahead of time, and I don't think it should start in October. Personally, I believe these conversations should be starting in June, July with the superintendent while they're building the budget to say, hey, look, what are we looking at? How are we going about this?
Thank you.
School districts cannot be expected to solve the mental health crisis alone. How would you leverage your role as commissioner to build formal partnerships with county health departments or private providers to offer wraparound services on campus?
So if my memory serves me correctly, I was a part of one of the first health hubs in funding that with the health department, and I believe that was at Great Mills. Was it the first one at Great Mills? It's been a while now. But working with the health department for mental health services is important, but it's also working with the rest of the providers. You know, the health department can't do it alone. So as a commissioner, you know, I can facilitate that and bring people together, whether it's for mobile crisis, whether it's crisis intervention, whether it's just mental health services for students, or it's taking the existing services and bridging them together and coming up with a way to make that happen. You know, often we find that there's compartmentalized services in county government that are underutilized. So if you find something that's underutilized, why would you be able to reallocate that someplace else to get maximum utilization out of it? And that is one of the biggest disadvantages sometimes in larger governments, is that you have these pockets of services that are just there, and people are wondering why nobody ever uses them until you take a solid look at it. So it's actually being involved in the process and not being distracted from it or distracted and also separated from it. You know, I did that with the fire departments with the fire rescue program when MIFRE was going to shut it down. And I just had to get involved and make it happen. And then luckily the school system was able to keep it, and MIFRE was able to get back involved, and it's still thriving. It took a lot of work, but that's often what it takes.
Thank you.
Sorry. We are one of the largest employers in the county, and our employees make a large part of the community. How would you support us in your budget?
So I think answering all of these questions the way I have shows how you can support in the budget. You know, it's about making sure that the needs are met for, and it's not just about being the largest employer, and it's not just a large part of the community. It's about the people that attend the schools and the families that participate in it, right? So it's about listening. It's about knowing that what you're saying is actually being heard and there's actions being taken on it. Okay. We're not all going to like every single outcome of it, but if it's explained how we're getting there, I think that's the most important thing. And then trying to get there is also important, but getting there is the most important thing out of all that, right? So there's various different ways. So supporting is just being real about the entire thing through the entire process. It's not the political nonsense of, you know, oh well, we'll see, we'll get to it later, we'll talk about that another time. It's really being like, look, we can't get there right now. We just can't do it right now. But look, give me some time. I'm going to work with the superintendent. We're going to figure this out. And inviting people to the table to help figure it out, that is the most important thing. My professor at Johns Hopkins, he's a chief of police, a famous guy in the police world, Dave Mitchell. And the way he said it to me is if you want to be successful, what you do is you'll never know everything about everything, but you surround yourself with the people that do, and then you trust them. And then you take their opinions, and you take their comments and their breadth of experience, and you bring that all in, right? So I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator. You know, my sister is, or was, and you know, I've spoken to her about it. But if I needed advice from an educator or a teacher, I would have to listen to them, and I have to take that on face value, and I would have to form my opinions on that. I think that's the best way to give support in this, is actually listening, moving forward, and then just keeping it real about where we're at.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners often have equal power but differing viewpoints. Describe a time you had to build consensus among a group of peers with conflicting priorities. What was your strategy?
Every Tuesday at every commissioner meeting, you know, there was always different viewpoints, and from the dais, the biggest one. It was actually the revamping of the entire pay scale for the sheriff's department. That was probably one of the larger undertakings I did as a county commissioner. We had different opinions from command staff, different opinions from the FOP, differing opinions from every commissioner, HR, the budget, finance. So getting consensus among all of them was really, it was a huge task. But getting everybody to the table, and we all had the meetings where you saw the conversations, but there were so many meetings that happened before that with different pockets, and it was getting the buy-in to the change. Getting everybody to buy into the fact that this is going to benefit us in the long term, finding the positives, pointing out the negatives, and really trying to carry the positive message to each group. Taking a little bit of each group and the successes there and building it into one success. So there was negatives in every single side of why this can't be done, but there was positives of why it could be done. And then taking those positives to each group and then finally getting everybody together where nobody was 100% happy, but everybody was, you know, we're good with this, right? That was a good place to be. We were never going to get everybody happy about it, but it was compromise across the board, and it was give and take, and it was making sure that everybody stayed on the same page.